From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review if you are watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today we got another banger for you, another fire content type day. A little ironic we call it fire content because it's about to be snowmageddon here in southeast Louisiana as we get prepared for the cold coming to New Orleans, which is actually obviously a good start, a good place for us to start programming wise. More than likely, we will not have an overtime podcast on Wednesday. Hopefully, everything will be back to normal. Andre and I have assignments. We got to help out the news department over the next couple of days. So, more than likely, no overtime podcast Wednesday. Hopefully, back up on Friday, the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. All right, today, Monday, we watched some good football this past weekend. And no doubt about that when you talk about all the conference, divisional round games, and it was fun. It was really fun. But one Saints candidate is now available, which, to be honest, I don't think anyone thought they would be available, the Detroit Lions, this week. So that's where we're going to go with the big picture today. But first things first, are you ready for the cold?
I'm ready. You see, I got my snow boots on right now.
I got to buy me a pair of them.
Before I came back to New Orleans, born and raised here, but before I came back here, spent 2 years in Ohio. So I've seen my fair share of snow. So I'm
Different
ready.
kind of cold up there.
Yeah, I had to break out the snow gear, the parka, the battery-powered gloves, the boots. I'm ready. As ready could be.
I've seen them dressed up in that cold weather gear. I'm like, yo.
It's like a suit of armor.
Where you going, man? It's something to watch. But seriously, hope everyone feels safe out there. And if it snows and you got young kids, like I do, I hope they enjoy making snowmen and snow angels and all that good stuff, because I know my kids are very, very excited about the snow potentially coming. But in all seriousness, get everything ready, take all your precautions, and then hopefully in a couple days we'll be all good like we're used to being. All right, big picture today. Playoffs came and went. We're going to give our perception or our sort of just take of what we saw from Divisional weekend. I got a couple things. You got a couple things. We have to start with arguably the biggest upset of the weekend. That was Washington defeating Detroit. And why that pertains to the Saints is because obviously they have a very keen interest in their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who is now available. Aaron Glenn is scheduled to meet in person with the Jets today or tomorrow. And then it's at some point with the Saints. I don't know how the weather's going to help or hurt the I can't even talk today. The potential of him getting here to meet in person, but obviously Aaron Glenn is a name very high on the Saints list. So today we had to go with the big picture, much like we did with Mike McCarthy a couple pods ago. We're going to now kind of get into really each candidate, and today we're really going to focus on Aaron Glenn, the big picture.
Right. This was not the best weekend for Aaron Glenn. His defense wound up getting torched by Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. But despite that, Aaron Glenn is still very much in the Saints coaching picture. So we're going to look at the candidate today. Aaron Glenn, we know that, or we expect him to be a good head coach in the league. But is he the right fit here in New Orleans? Aaron Glenn, by the way, DB coach in New Orleans from 2016 to 2020, and he also played a year with the Saints as well. So he's very familiar with this city, this community, and this team.
He very much is, and his name popped up the last coaching cycle, and from what I understand, he did very well in the last coaching cycle in terms of making an impression to potential, organizations. When I say last coaching cycle, last time the Saints were in the market for a head coach back in 2022. This is an interesting set of timing issues because we have now moved into in-person interviews with the exception of the candidates involved in conference championships. So this is obviously a big week in terms of which way the Saints are leaning, because if they're able to knock out an interview with Aaron Glenn in person, they have a Mike Kafka, who I didn't take seriously at first, but I think we have to now. For him to get a second interview, in person, as well as Anthony Weaver. Second interview in person this week is certainly something that they're obviously taking those candidates seriously, so we will as well. But for this pod, we're obviously staying with Aaron Glenn. But this is obviously a big week because you can now meet in person with those that just were knocked out of the divisional round. So if the Saints are still in the searching process after this week, that's a pretty clear indication that they have their eyes on someone that is playing in the conference championship games, or at least want to interview those people in the conference championships games. And I fully expect Mickey Loomis to take his time. The dude takes his time with everything. He's a naturally patient person. I can remember Sean Payton in his farewell press conference to us. He was joking around how him and Mickey were totally different because, Sean is such a sense of urgency, aggressive guy, and he said it even annoys me when Mickey, because he walks slow, like that. He's just a naturally methodical human being. So I have no doubt he's going to go through this process thoroughly. So this is a big week, and this is now a situation where if you're the Saints, at some point that cone has to shrink. And I have not have not seen any indication that anyone that they have interviewed is now off the list. In fact, the one name I'm still waiting on is, have they actually interviewed Mike McCarthy yet?
Doesn't seem like
I don't think they have yet. So hopefully that happens at some point this week because he's available right now to go. But okay, let's get into Aaron Glenn, because we had to talk about what happened Saturday night. He got absolutely worked. Look, we praised him for the work they did against the Minnesota Vikings a couple of weeks ago, the season finale that ensured them the #1 overall seed, which was supposed to be the pathway for them to get to the Super Bowl, but obviously Jaden Daniels and the Commanders had other plans. But I thought the defense looked out of sync. I thought the defense looked ill-prepared. I thought they looked undisciplined. I mean, the 12 men on the field on that fourth down is just not a good look. Against Washington, Jaden, the rookie quarterback, at home, it just didn't look good. It's very interesting to me how you put the injuries in its proper context, because they were praising him for overcoming the incredible amount of injuries against Minnesota, but now you're kind of hearing some talk about, all the injuries, and it's true. But are we using it as a reason, or are we not using it as a reason for their success or failure? It almost sounds like when it was success, look what he did despite injuries. When they failed, they got injuries.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know where the fan base is on Aaron Glenn. I know he probably lost a few supporters this past weekend because it was just such on display, and you give up 44 or 45 points to a rookie. I mean, they only punted once. Washington's punted one time in 2 playoff games, which is another topic of conversation, which I'm sure we'll get into. Just the fact that him and Cliff were in such good chemistry. But I just felt like that defense struggled. But I don't think that knocks him off the list for anyone. I still believe Aaron Glenn is going to be a head coach in this cycle. Now, what's funny is, you start doing your research on your candidates, and then you sort of kind of get a buzz because we're so New Orleans-centric here. So I decided to kind of do some podcast searching. So I went on the New York Jets kind of scene. Whoever does those podcasts, it was the New York Post Sports. There was their Locked On Jets. There was 1 or 2 other pods that I ended up listening to. And one thing that I've always connected Glenn to the Jets because he played there, but the one thing I probably underestimated was just how beloved Aaron Glenn is by the Jets community, by the Jets fan base, and how much his name strikes a chord with that fan base. So those pods did a really good job of explaining just how much a Glenn head coaching the candidacy or Glenn coaching the New York Jets really resonates. The best comparison I could give it to, he played there for 8 seasons. This player played with the Saints for now 7 seasons. Unquestioned leader, community, all those things. If DeMario Davis was suddenly a head coaching candidate, how much that would excite the New Orleans Saints fan base. I think that's fair comparison to how much the Aaron Glenn candidacy has excited the New York Jets fan base. So I think that is really who the Saints are up against. What we do not know, and I think this is, again, we'll see how the process plays out this week. Where is he at on the Saints list? I know he's serious. He's a contender. But if you've noticed, I have never once called him the front runner because I don't like that word, because I don't think the Saints went into this intentionally I think they went into this intentionally without a front runner, because they were kind of all in on Dennis Allen last time around. and he was the front runner, and he got the job. This time around, they're probably a little bit more open-minded. So where does he land on the hierarchy? Where does he land on the list? And how many more interviews do they really want to do and have to do? So I think this is a big week, and that's why I think you have to take Aaron Glenn seriously. But I also think you have to take Aaron Glenn to the Jets seriously. And if this drags into next week and Aaron Glenn is not a head coach somewhere, is that to tell that perhaps the Saints have cooled on him and they've moved on to whoever's playing in the conference championship games? Those are all things to consider, but this is a huge, I keep saying it, this is a huge week this week.
It definitely is. You know, you mentioned the conference championship week. I was definitely watching the Commanders-Lions, and you guys know how I feel about Cliff Kingsbury and how high I had Kingsbury on my list. Kingsbury versus Aaron Glenn. Kingsbury definitely took the win in that one. But, I mean, back to Aaron Glenn, it really, I mean, the original question, is he the right fit for the Saints? And my answer on that from the beginning has been no. I think Aaron Glenn can be a good coach somewhere, but for what the Saints need, I do not think he's the right fit. Number one, I think he's more of the same of what you had. I mean, you just moved on from Dennis Allen. Who coached under Dennis Allen for 4 years? Aaron Glenn. I don't know how you expect to move away from the Dennis Allen era by hiring a Dennis Allen disciple. This is a franchise that has been going the same way for a long time, and it has not worked in a long time. It's been a long time since the Saints have been in the playoffs, so I think you need to take a left turn from what you've been doing. Aaron Glenn feels more like a turn in the same direction that you've been going. Another thing about hiring a defensive head coach, you're going to have to bring in an offensive coordinator, and the thing about bringing in an offensive coordinator is the league loves new, young, fresh offensive minds. You bring in an offensive coordinator. If he does well, he's going to get poached, and you'll be bringing in another offensive coordinator in another 2 or 3 years, which is not necessarily a big deal if you have a veteran quarterback. But the Saints are a team that we're expecting to be in the market for a young quarterback.
At some point.
Right, at some point, a future leader of the team, whether they trade up. I mean, we talked about their quarterback options in our last podcast, whether they trade up to take a guy, whether they take somebody later in the draft, whether they roll with Rattler, whether they kick the can down the road and draft a quarterback next year. You're going to have a young quarterback leading this franchise sooner than later. And do you want that young quarterback to go through OC after OC after OC, 3 new offenses in his first 4 or 5 years like we've seen some quarterbacks in this league go through? I don't. That's why I think the move would be to hire an offensive-minded head coach. Aaron Glenn is not that. Also, I'm not sure how much this kind of goes into it, but when you look at the Saints roster, at least in the immediate future, you've got a lot of leaders on defense, a lot of veterans in the room. The Cam Jordans, who says he will be back next year. The DeMario Davises, the Tyrann Matthews. You've got veterans on that defense. You take Derek Carr out the equation, who's really your leader on offense?
Right.
Who's your veteran voice on offense when you've got a defensive head coach to kind of rally the troops? Take Derek Carr out. Is it Alvin Kamara? Is he the veteran leader of the offense?
Yes, yeah.
Eric McCoy, maybe? I mean, he's still relatively young himself. You can't really rely on Chris Olave to be a veteran leader. He's a quote-unquote kid himself. So, you know, you got a lot of youth on the offense. I think an offensive coach would be the best fit if you're looking for a new coach of the Saints, and unfortunately, Aaron Glenn is not that. Now, his style, his strengths, they're going to fit somewhere. They may even fit in New York, where you've got a really talented young defense like with Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner and those guys out there. But here in New Orleans, I don't think Aaron Glenn is the fit for the Saints.
I just wonder. I don't think the last game is going to rattle his candidacy too much.
So
like I said, I still think he's a head coach this cycle. I also think he has to hit this cycle. Like I think if he doesn't catch this cycle, it's going to be a while before he gets another one. I think this is his chance. His name is up there. It's a hot candidate. It's a hot name. Like he's there. Like now is his time to get to an organization. I don't know how the Jets operate. Like I said before, it seems like there's a lot of turnover in that organization. I don't know if Glenn prefers that, although it has been said by that New York Post that he said the Jets would be his top choice. Clearly there's some kind of connection there. Is that connection deeper than his one with the Saints? I would say
Probably.
so. But just because you have deeper connection does not mean it's the best job. So there are a lot of different factors here. And if you're the Saints, how hard are you fighting to get him? You laid out the reasons why you don't think he's a good fit. And I know they've considered those reasons. You know, all things being equal, they probably want to go with an offensive guy right now because they just look at the history of the organization from offense to defense to offense. Every time they change coaches, they just get one from an offensive guy to a defensive guy. How hard do they fight? And when does he get here for the in-person interviews if that happens? I saw Ian Rappaport report that he was coming this week after the Jets. I don't think. Matter of fact, let me look real quick. I don't think he gave a specific day as to when that would be, but let me look. It's going to be of course, it's not working here. All right, here we go. It just says Saints after that. So it's Aaron Glenn to the Jets tomorrow, Saints after that. So we'll and the Saints have been pretty good about when they've been able to finish those interviews as far as letting everyone know. So point being, they want to talk to him. But if there's a stronger connection to the Jets, I don't know if I see Mickey Loomis fighting tooth and nail to get him if there's that strong connection to the Jets.
I guess it depends on, is that your guy? You know, it's similar to with quarterbacks. They say, look, if that's your guy, you move heaven and earth to go in the draft and get him. If that's the guy that you think is the future of this league. If you're looking at these coaches and you think Aaron Glenn is my guy, there's nobody else in this coaching cycle that can give me what Aaron Glenn gives me. He's familiar with the city. He's familiar with the culture. He was around for seasons where we were elite. When Dennis Allen turned that defense around, he was a big part of that. That's our guy. If that's what you believe, if you're Mickey Loomis, then I think similar to how you would with the quarterback, you move heaven and earth to bring that guy here. Now, but the question is that how they feel?
Is Glenn that guy? Does Glenn have? I mean, like for instance, I could see a bidding war for Ben Johnson. I don't know about Aaron Glenn,
especially when you look at the options that are still out there.
Yeah.
Maybe if Joe Brady and Cliff Kingsbury have been hired off, and you're really looking around and you're like, man, I don't know if we have any other options around, and he's the best one. But to me, right now, it's still early in the coaching cycle. Ben Johnson just got hired, and that was, I believe, the first coach to get hired this cycle. Mike McCarthy's still
Vrabel.
It's Vrabel.
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy's still around. You still have a lot of options to where Aaron Glenn isn't the only viable guy out there.
And I'm curious because this is just my own feeling. I think Loomis is going to want to talk to Joe Brady in person. I don't know if Kingsbury is going to take an interview here. He might not. But I think they would be enamored with Cliff Kingsbury, or at least want to talk to him either virtually or face-to-face. They've already done the virtual with Joe Brady. So I could see a situation where maybe the Jets are like, all right, I'm ready to do this now. And the Saints just simply aren't ready to pull the trigger yet. And that's how Aaron Glenn ends up with the Jets.
Yeah.
So then you can end up with the Saints. I don't want to write that off because I still think that's a very realistic possibility because I do think there are some traits that he possesses that I know they value. Forget offensive defense for a second. We've heard the term leader of men. It's a presence. It's a walk in the room presence that he will undoubtedly have. Now, he would have to, prove he can assemble a quality staff, which is something that is probably the most underrated thing a head coach does, is assemble a quality football staff. But I don't know. I really don't have a feeling on anyone right now in terms of who would be the front runner. Because Mike McCarthy was let go or he left or whatever. I mean, you saw the betting odds shoot up for Mike McCarthy, and you saw everyone link the Saints to Mike McCarthy. But here we are, 6-7 days later, 8 days, he still hasn't interviewed. What do you make of that?
It seems that to me, Mike McCarthy, with his resume, and we've talked extensively about McCarthy, he should have been one of the first guys interviewed. But it seems like either teams aren't as high on him as his resume states they should be, or it's one of those situations where it's like, these are the hot names, the Aaron Glenns, the Ben Johnsons, the Joe Bradys. They're going to go quick. Mike McCarthy will be there. Maybe they see him as a reliable fallback option.
Yeah, it's possible.
But yeah, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more traction with his name.
To be fair, though, there was a report that said he was going to meet with them this week. We just, I don't know when that's going to be.
Right. Maybe his is being kept on the low.
Yeah, we'll see. But we'll see. I mean, look, Aaron Glenn is still very much in play here for the Saints. I want to make sure we say that. I just very curious where how Glenn views the Saints. I think he views them favorably, and how strong is that connection to the Jets? Because if up to the Jets fan base, it feels like Aaron Glenn would be their guy. All right, what else we got today? We have a couple other things we wanted to get to today.
Great playoff games over the weekend, and as we head into conference championship weeks, maybe not the matchups that we expected. Maybe that's the matchup you expected on the AFC side, Chiefs versus Bills, which has kind of become a rivalry through the years. But Eagles Commanders, that was not the matchup I expected in the NFC Championship when we went in. And so far, Sean, throughout the postseason, we've had a lot of surprises. We've had some things go as we expected. What's some of the things that you've taken away from it?
Well, I've been on coordinator watch, there's no doubt about it. And I thought Cliff Kingsbury was awesome. I thought Joe Brady was awesome. I thought Glenn struggled a little bit. I thought Kellen Moore was okay. It was a kind of the wild game with the weather. I wasn't sure what was going on with Todd Monken. I just didn't know what they did. But my biggest perception, or my biggest sort of takeaway from playoff divisional weekend was Kingsbury and Daniels, Kingsbury and Jaden. I mean, the average fan may not understand this, but the synergy between those two is unreal right now. It is unreal right now. They have punted once in the last two games, as we mentioned. That's incredible with a rookie quarterback who is a naturally poised person. There's no doubt about that. But to get to this level where they have already kind of transformed from, okay, let's help the rookie to succeed by getting better around, or, when you usually see a rookie successful quarterback, usually it's with a pretty good team around him. But now Jaden is basically stepped to the front of that organization as the face of the organization, and he is sort of the guy that's pulling everything, which is unbelievable that quickly. And it really happened early in the season. But to get there, to get to that point, it can't just be QB talent. A lot of it is, there's also football IQ. There's also that natural QB pacing that goes in where things aren't erratic. Things are fairly slow for you. Where, look at Caleb right now, Caleb Williams. The game just still feels very erratic. But so you don't get to that level without the DNA that you have, but also just an unbelievable synergy with your offensive coordinator. That marriage, it's going to be hard to break up for King, because Kingsbury's not going to leave unless he has the perfect opportunity, because those two have gone together, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch, just how well those two seem to mesh, and how, because those two are so aligned, everything else falls into place. It really is something to watch. That was my biggest takeaway from playoff weekend.
My biggest takeaway was, and I agree with you right there, Jaden Daniels, and that was one of my takeaways as well. Jaden Daniels is on pace to potentially have the greatest rookie season we've ever seen.
Yeah.
There's never been a rookie quarterback start in the Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels is one game away from doing that and potentially being the one to take down Mahomes, or being the one to have a shootout with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But speaking of taking down Mahomes, that was my takeaway is, if you cannot beat the Chiefs this year, I don't know when you're going to beat them.
Yeah.
The Chiefs are as vulnerable as we have ever seen them. Offensively, they have not been the just powerhouse that we saw them when they had Tyreek Hill going deep and they had Travis Kelce unguardable in his prime. They've had injuries from Rashee Rice to Hollywood Brown, who's back, but he's not producing how they expected him to. Isaiah Pacheco's back. He's not getting the volume of carries that he was in the beginning of the year, or even that we saw him get during their Super Bowl run last year. Even at times, Travis Kelce, the age seems like it's showing at times. He seems slow,
Yeah.
Obviously still fast enough to get open and make big plays. We saw him make a few big catches yesterday in the game against the Texans, or Saturday, whenever they played the Texans. But this seems like it's the most vulnerable that the Chiefs will ever be. And if you can't beat them this year, then I don't know when you're ever going to take Mahomes down.
Well, that's interesting, because my next takeaway was Joe Brady and Josh Allen. People may be kind of didn't like the way they handled the second half of that game. I thought it was flawless. I thought other than them not getting into the end zone on that last drive, I thought Joe Brady's pacing to that game was perfect. It was a deliberately patient, deliberately methodical, and they stayed within that the whole game. It would have been so easy to just get a little impatient at one point and just try to go for it all.
Yep.
And try to do it, and they did. That game did not call for that. Even I went back and forth, but I really think I would have taken the field goal the way McDermott did at the end, because they had to get the 2-pointer to tie it.
Yep.
I thought it was the right call, even because if they would have missed that, man, I don't think I don't know if they would have won that game. And then also, we got a couple more minutes here. So Joe Brady to me stood out, no doubt about it, the pacing. But we have to really, the Lamar Jackson Baltimore Ravens playoff drop off has to be studied.
Yeah.
I've never. See, look, Lamar was okay. He was it was an overall positive game for Lamar. He was pretty good. He had the touchdown at the end, but the two turnovers in the first half. The Mark Andrews is his guy. That is the most dependable guy on the team. That's the guy Lamar trusts more than any other quarterback. It's like that whole organization gets tight, gets stiff, and Lamar, like I said, was pretty good. I would say that pretty good to good. He just kind of becomes a guy during pretty good pretty good in the playoffs. He's never take over the game, generational talent in the playoffs. What is going on with the Baltimore Ravens? How they cannot get it done in the playoffs?
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, it's another postseason that ends early for Lamar Jackson, But one thing, Lamar and a lot of the other quarterbacks, that's what took me to my last take. The league is in a very good place right now because this postseason, there's no elder statesman. There's no Tom Brady. There's no Aaron Rodgers. Last year, we had Joe Flacco. There's no Matthew Stafford. All of those guys are out. You've got a lot of young faces in the playoffs. You've got Mahomes. You've got the rookie Jaden Daniels. You've got Jalen Hurts. You've got Josh Allen. You just had Lamar Jackson in it. Just so many young, talented quarterbacks that are beginning to take the league over from the names who had dominated it for so long. When Patrick Mahomes is your oldest guy, your quote-unquote elder
29,
statesman.
30?
Yeah, you're in a good place as a league. So as a football fan, it's excited to see so much young, talented so many young, talented players at such an important position. Which one of them would come in New Orleans?
Well, first off, real quick before we get out of here, I think it's pretty obvious the Super Bowl matchup everyone wants to see.
Oh, absolutely.
Come on, it's Buffalo, Washington, right?
Yeah.
Y'all know it, except for KC and Philly.
Yeah, I don't know. Those Swifties might argue with you.
And the Swifties as well. All right. Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. Again, we may not be back here on Wednesday. We'll let you guys know, but we'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.